Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the All In podcast today. All right, so Cassandra and I were talking, and we're going to talk about let go and let flow, and I think that really comes from just kind of where we are in this moment, and sometimes not always easy when we talk about what we need to let go of, but recognizing that sometimes we can be focused on things that just don't align, don't make you feel good. And I think specifically as entrepreneurs, it can be very tough in working on things that, as they say, working in the business versus working on the business. And I think sometimes you have to recognize and take a step back and look at things and say, okay, am I working on things that I really should be working on? And so sometimes we have to decide to let go. And I will tell you in this moment for me, I've had one of those weeks where it ebbs and flows, and there's some really good stuff. This month, I'm focusing on finishing my book and editing it and doing some things, and that's felt really great. But I still have a business to run. And so that also means talking to people and getting out here, but recognizing even in that moment that it can be hard and letting go of things that don't bring you joy, but recognizing that there's some things you just have to do. And I think I'm in that moment right now of recognizing that there are things that we know, and I have been told, Paula does what she wants to do when she wants to do it. And nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also something to be said for those things you have to do. And so I'm in this space specifically this week around trying to figure that out of the things I need to let go and let flow. And not easy. Like I recognize it's not easy, but I also recognize that our energy comes from that, right? And how we show up, what we do daily. And it can just be hard. And so this week we're just gonna, talk about that, just the letting go, let it flow, and recognizing it's okay in even the space that you're in. And for me in particular, of making some tough decisions around conversations I will or will not have going forward and being okay with it and being okay with it. So, Sandra.
So yeah, my two words are still peace and consistency, and I'm starting to find the peace part. I'm not so good on the consistency part yet, and the reason that consistency for me has been so important, and I'll tell a quick little story about it. When I was studying voice in my 20s in opera, I had an amazing coach, and she didn't just teach us to like sing and get out and audition and do things. She actually tried to help you learn to be an artist and a business. And I was so blessed to have had that experience when I was in my 20s. And what she taught me was that there are certain days that you spend productively doing all the stuff that you need to get done in order to set yourself up then to have like the creative days that then sets you up to have
Mhm.
sort of the buffer days, and then go and then do the job you do, right? So whether it's singing or whatever it is, speaking. And I remember she had this like handwritten sheet, and it had like this information about buffer days and this and that and the other thing, and I was like, this is really interesting. I started actually implementing that in my life and in my business. And because I was always juggling a lot of balls, but I was trying to figure out how do I keep them in the air, but not like feel like I'm barely keeping them in the air, where I'm just like,
Yeah.
right. And so we're talking about the let go, let flow, right? I got into a very, very, very good routine for years and years and years where this is when I take care of this. This is when I take care of this. This is the days I do that. What I have not done in the last 5 years, and I will say five because I would say probably since 2020 when everything kind of went awry and we all went into desperation mode in many ways. I haven't been able to reset that back into that sense of normal routine slash consistency slash. And when I did have that, I felt calmer most of the time because I felt like, okay, we were talking about email lists, right? We were talking about like getting email lists put together. I had things in place in my business that made my life easier. And I would do those things. and I would set boundaries around my time, and I wouldn't scatter my schedule with coffees and networkings and this and that and the other thing and all these things that pull away from my ability to be consistent, which then makes it harder for things to flow
Yeah.
and for you to be able to sort of intentionally let go. And so the let go thing for me is sort of letting go of this sort of chaotic schedule
Mhm.
and sort of rein it in and create more of an intentional schedule again, where it doesn't feel like I'm jumping from thing to thing to thing. And I see it in clients, I see it in a lot of friends I know and colleagues that are talking a lot about just like, I'm having trouble getting focused, I'm having trouble getting motivated, I'm having trouble, getting that productivity done or doing the stuff that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
I just want to do the thing I love. And I get that. I've lived that my whole career. But there's also something to be said about I have to create some structure, some boundaries in order to create that flow. And that's where, that's where I'm at. I'm at sort of a place of very, very good peace. I feel very peaceful, but I also feel like, okay, I'm not going to be in a hurry, and I'm going to chip away at those things to create an intentional schedule that works for me, where I feel like I'm not running around, just trying to play whack-a-mole. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for the boundaries piece, and I think we all have good intentions. I think that one of my favorite words that I try very hard to focus on, not even try, I do, is being intentional, and that schedule piece is it, right? It's even one of the things that I have done over the years has been very clear about when I network, and so for me, those days are Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are my days. That's when I network, I coffees, all the things, right? Um, but even that has gotten out of hand because then it becomes too much. And so I have to limit myself with, you can't have more than 3 or 4 of those a day on those 2 days, so whatever. But it is about being intentional about your schedule and being intentional about what you choose to do and even putting in rest time. There was a day last week where I think I was working really, really late. And then there was a point, I was talking to a friend and she was like, shut it down. We're done. This is it, done. And that was my reminder of, yep, you're doing too much. And so even your rest time has to be in there. And, we were just saying, we're both going walking after this, right? And there's something to be said, but that's part of it as well. So even just this idea of let go and let flow, it really is making sure that you're intentional about your calendar. Obviously the self-care is important. Being very honest with yourself. And I recognize from myself that there are times, and I talk about authenticity a lot, and I'm very authentic and direct in all the things, and I show up as myself. But I also recognize there's some things you just have to do. You just have to do, even if you don't want to do it. It's okay. It's okay. It's being honest about it. That's the authentic person, right? Being authentic enough to say, I don't want to do it, but I know I have to do it. You just got to keep moving with it. And I think that's the part that can sometimes be tough when it comes to schedules and trying to align all the things and do some of the things that we don't necessarily want to do. But still got to do it. And I think part of it is going with the flow and just recognize, as what do they say? It's do the hard things first. Do the hard things first. And so even in my days, I'm starting to look at that and say, what is the hard stuff I got to get done today? Let's get that done first, so it's out the way. And again, recognizing it has to be done. So that intentionality around the calendar and just our time and what we focus on, it's important. It's important.
I had a student many years ago, I would say probably 20 years ago, that I had done a time management workshop for some of my clients, very much like what my voice coach did when I was in my 20s. And she was like, you have to figure out how to make this all work. Because you had to practice in there too, because if you were going to be a high
Yes.
level vocalist, then practice was actually number one on the list. And she wasn't a professional singer, but she would come every week and I would say, hey, did you practice your song? And she would be like, well, no, I didn't have time. And this went on for, several weeks. And finally I sat her down and I said, hey, I go, can we talk a little bit about this practice thing? And so I had her fill out this like, what is your current schedule worksheet that I
Mhm.
created, and I color code it, and all of this. And when we got done, she looked at it and she goes, I have time to practice. She's like, where did all my time go?
Mhm.
Because she blocked things. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, she was intentionally blocking, a lunch, a this, a that, but she was doing
Yeah.
so much of it
Yeah.
that it felt like she was busy all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
And when she really looked at it, through a factual lens, like this is what I'm actually
Yeah.
doing in a week,
Yeah.
um, she was shocked because we found like 25 hours of time she could have
Yeah.
been practicing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think that that's like what Paul and I are talking about a little bit today is sort of, where is your time going? And is it going where you actually really want it to go? And is it going where it's, where you can balance your self-care and fun, right? And social time and family time with your work, but also with the part of the work that you actually really love, why
Exactly.
you do it in the first place. And that's what I think the flow, the let go part, it's like if you know that and you're clear about it, then you can align your calendar around supporting those things. But
Yep.
if you're not clear on it and you're just, as like I like to call it, throwing darts at the dartboard with a blindfold on, right? And trying to hit, versus taking the dart, walking over to the dartboard and putting it in the
Yep.
bullseye. That's more intentional. That's saying, I'm not going to just leave this to chance. I'm going to actually create what I want.
Right. Right.
And that creates flow, that
Yep.
creates freedom.
Yep.
And I'm preaching to myself right now because this is something that I have struggled a little bit with in the last year, especially just trying to kind of redefine what my schedule looks like and why things feel a little scattered. Um, and we all go through that. We feel like we got to do all the things.
Yep.
To your point with the networking. And I think that scheduling networking is important part of the business. I do it. I go to networking events intentionally. But like you, I have to limit it. I have to say I'm only going to do one or two of those things a week, so that I'm not loading up my schedule, especially if it requires you traveling somewhere or going and meeting someone, because then you have more time involved. And it's all good. Those are good things to meet people and network. But I think sometimes we feel like we're working when we network more than we actually are, and we're not getting the stuff done over here that we actually need to get done for the business. Um, that's my soapbox and I'm preaching myself right now, right here.
Right now in this moment. So here's what we'll say as we wrap up here. I'm going to ask everybody to be intentional, and think about your calendar and your schedule and your boundaries. And what is it that you may need to let go of and what you need to, let flow. But here's the thing with that is be real honest with yourself. And it goes back to what Cassandra just said, even about the time management. And it's so funny. I literally have a time management sheet right here that I even told myself, Paula, let's fill that out this week. I literally said that because I recognized, yeah, the time is going to different places. I'm going to challenge everybody. Like, let's really be intentional and take a look at where your time is being spent. You will be amazed at what you may find. 25 hours, as you talked about, right? The reality is we have more time. I think we're just not spending it in the things that honestly make sense, make us happy, but also just being very clear about if you really took the time, you'd be amazed. So I'm going to challenge everybody to do that. And let's really focus on where our time is going. And if you have to let go and let flow, do it. Do it.
So yeah, so we'll wrap it up. I will say something just as a quick aside. Somehow Paul and I end up very much aligned every week with sort of what we end up talking about. So if we are, then probably you are too in some ways, sort of feeling, these things. So pop it in the comments if you have anything to share or add, and have a wonderful day. Go flow.
Well, bye.